Hello and welcome everybody to the webinar on business analysis tools and techniques. I'm Yulia Kosarenko. I'm the author of the book Business Analyst, A Profession and a Mindset. Today we have a large group. We are doing our webinar number 4 and we will be talking about business analysis tools and techniques. So I am going to share my screen with you now and we will get started. And let me just make sure that everything is looking nice. I will rely on you to let me know if something is off or if you lose the share, because I don't have anybody who is helping me with admin tasks. So I'm trying to do the webinar and also keep track of all the technical details. So if anything is not okay, please just type in the chat, maybe use all caps if you lost the sound or if you lost the screen share. Is everybody ready to get started? Just give me a yes in the chat and we'll get started. Yes? Okay, wonderful. All right, so let us get started. So who am I and why am I doing these webinars? So my name is Yulia Kosarenko. I've been a business analyst and a business architect for many years. I manage the business analysis team and then I manage the business architecture team. Right now I have my own consulting company called Y Change Consulting. So I work with corporate clients and I also work with business analysts individually as a coach. I write articles, I conduct webinars. I'm planning to add some online training to my portfolio. And I will also be teaching a course on analytics at Humber College here in Toronto. And here is my book, Business Analyst, A Profession and a Mindset. It's actually just about a year since I published it. It's available on Amazon and Kobo. And to me, this is what I think about business analysis and why I love it. Why, to me, this is a special mindset that you need to have to be excellent at this job. So if you are interested, have a look. And there is a digital version available if you'd like to buy one. Hopefully it will give you some additional information. I will be using some of the materials from that book also in this webinar today. All right, so let's get started. Here is our agenda. We will talk about business analysis techniques. I'll give you a little bit of an overview, and we will focus on some of these techniques today. We will not be able to capture all of them, of course, but there are a few that I chose to touch base on because those are used frequently or perhaps are underused and should be used more. So we'll talk about how to ask questions. We'll talk about immersion on the job, artifact analysis, root cause analysis, process analysis, modeling, and then about tools for capturing and sharing business requirements. So this is my little model of who is a business analyst, because we talk about business analysis as a profession, and every profession has certain components, starting with the knowledge and skills and training and tools and techniques that you need to have to be able to do your job. There is certain motivation that drives you, that motivates you to do this job well, and of course the experience as that you gain on the job. And then you produce certain outcomes. Why is it that your job is needed? There are certain deliverables that are dependent on you. So we have talked before in previous webinars about business analysis process and about outcomes and deliverables. And today we will talk about tools and techniques. And every time you hear me, you'll probably hear me mention business analyst mindset. And that's how you think and what drives you to do this best job. So we will keep returning to this concept over and over. All right, so let's move on and let's talk about business analysis activities. When we talk about the tools and techniques, we apply them as we go through those daily activities. And I separate business analysis activities into core and non-core. When we talk about core activities, these are the ones that you use to produce your deliverables, the deliverables of business analysis. And non-core would be all of the other things that you have to do as part of the team, as a member of the agile team or the project, or sometimes you're helping others or perhaps doing peer review for your fellow business analysts. So for today, we are going to focus on core business analysis activities. You see here a list, which of course is not complete. but we will look at how we interview business experts and shadow them to understand the business better. We search for information. Sometimes we have to scour and investigate and find some obscure information that is not that easy to find. We will facilitate requirements workshops and other types of meetings. We will analyze processes and create process flow diagrams. We will learn about business, create business models, analyze scenarios, data, reports, capture the results of our analysis, and so on and so forth. So as we go through these techniques today, you will apply those techniques for these core activities. And someone actually switched off the light on me, so hold on a second, I'll be back. Okay, hopefully this is better. All right. This is stuff that happens when you close your door to do the webinar. Okay, so just a quick recap. We talked before about business analysis process and techniques. So what you see today is one of the ways to explain business analysis process, starting with discovery of current state, making certain assumptions that help you get started in your analysis, then working on analysis, then the synthesis of the solution, validating it, prioritizing it, and all the time you're packaging it. So you're putting together your requirements, capturing them, cross-referencing, organizing so that you don't get lost and others don't get lost. So as we look at all of these items here, these are really some of the techniques we are applying as we're going through the process. So what we will do today, we will talk about some of the techniques we use during the discovery process, during analysis, and for packaging of requirements. And of course, there is much more to the job, as probably many of you already know, but we will focus on a few that are very, very useful. So let's talk about discovery. And I added here a quote here. I think it's a Chinese proverb that says, "He who asks a question is a fool for 5 minutes. He who doesn't ask a question remains a fool forever." So to me, it's a very powerful thought that I wanted to leave with you here, because as we go through this discovery and analysis, sometimes we just don't ask that one question for various reasons. And what happens often, and maybe you have your own experiences, the question that you didn't ask actually comes back later and it bites you and it causes the problems. And the question that you didn't ask, maybe because it was an inconvenient one, sometimes the answer to it would be, oh, there is a gap, oh, that's a problem, oh, that's not as simple as you thought. So not asking the question sometimes really becomes a problem later on. And if you have experienced anything like that, then just say yes in the chat and I'll know that perhaps I'm not alone. It certainly happened to me a few times. So really, as we do discovery of the current state, we have to ask a lot of questions. Yes, I can see a few yeses. Thank you. So let's talk about asking questions. Is there any trick to asking questions? Everyone knows how to do it. Kids do it a lot. And if anything, we should learn from our kids who ask a lot of why questions. Those are excellent questions. So here are just a few tips, again, from my book in terms of what is the advice and what are the tips of asking questions. And yeah, I see here, I think it's Paul who had to get up at 4 a.m. says, I had PM try to remove me from a project because I asked a question. Yes, PMs and business analysts do not always look eye to eye. Sometimes there is a little bit of a conflict of interest when a PM wants to get on with the scope and then business analyst discovers something that doesn't fit in the scope, right? And that's where the problems happen. But you know what? If you don't ask those questions, we know what happens later sometimes, and we discover, oh my God. And Rosie was removed from a project when you started asking questions. Rosie, I feel for you. I had a story happen to me once when I was a business analyst, and I was given basically a set of requirements already done by someone else, by a business stakeholder who said, this is what we want. And as I started to ask questions, because I saw that nothing was very simple. It wasn't as simple as they thought, and it's not gonna work the way that it was requested. So I actually had someone come to my boss and tell my boss, tell her to stop analyzing our requirements. So to me, this was a pinnacle of I guess irony, where I was a business analyst and my job I thought was to analyze, and someone told me to stop analyzing. So a little bit ironic. What do you think? All right, so I see a few comments coming in. Thank you. So we'll move on to our topic, and then I'll come back and scroll through and answer the question. So let's talk about asking questions. First of all, we need to ask a lot of exploratory questions. We need to explore our problem. If you're given a business problem, you really need to understand what's going on around it. It's not just that particular little thing that you need to know about. You need to know what drives the process. What are the rules? Why are we doing what we are doing? What are the impacts of this problem? What happens downstream from it? What happens upstream from it? What is the data that comes from outside that this particular business process is using? Where does the outcome of this particular business process go later? Because as you analyze just one little piece without understanding the scope of the problem, you may be missing some of the requirements. So you need to really explore the context around your problem. You need to ask open-ended questions. Here are a few examples. Tell me about what happens if. Please describe. Explain how this works. Open-ended questions are those where you are seeking information, where you're asking your respondent to tell you what they think is relevant. You're not leading them to a particular answer. You're really trying to discover the information. Yes, the slides will be shared for sure after the presentation, so don't worry, you don't have to try to take screenshots. I'll share everything with you. So these open-ended questions are really helpful, especially at the beginning of your analysis. If you're already at the end and you are validating, then yes, then you will ask more and more close-ended questions, because you may already have a certain business rule or requirement captured. You're just confirming and validating. But at the beginning, during the discovery, you really have to ask as many open-ended questions as possible. This is why we call it discovery. We need to avoid leading questions. Here is an example. So in this case, you will just print off the report and take it to your manager, right? That's a leading question. And those leading questions are very dangerous, because the person that you're asking it either will agree with you, or they wouldn't want to argue with you, or they'll say, well, it looks like she already knows, so why would I tell her otherwise? So leading questions, especially if you're not really sure, are going to cause you troubles. So try to avoid those unless you're just confirming. In this particular scenario, you may say, tell me what you would do in this case, because you may discover something very different than what you thought. Remember, you are not the expert on the business process. You're working with business experts who will tell you what they do. And also remember that whatever you read, if you ask your leading questions based on some procedures, people don't always do in practice what procedures say, right? They do what's easier. Another example of a leading question would be, so this is the only problem that you would encounter if a customer didn't pay on time, right? And maybe, I don't know, maybe this is the most obvious answer is this. But if you ask me this leading question, I'll say, yeah, I guess so. But instead, if you ask me, what are the different scenarios that may happen if customer doesn't pay on time? You're forcing me to think, and you are forcing me to go back and maybe look back at my process, or try to figure out and remember, have we ever done something different? So leading questions really lock me in that piece of information that you put in front of me. And sometimes it's faster just to move on. But if you ask me an open-ended question, you may be triggering something in my memory and say, oh, you know what? A couple of times we had to do something different. And then maybe I'll go back and research it, and I'll give you more information. And that may be that exceptional scenario that you will now be able to capture, and you will be able to program. And if you didn't, when it happens after production, then someone will say, well, how come you never asked us about this? So really, those leading questions, try to replace them with open-ended questions as much as possible, especially if you don't feel that you are the expert in the business process. All right. So what happens when you join a project? Rosie is asking where there is a gap in the information provided and you realize that people don't know the answers. Excellent question. And as we start the discovery process, remember, sometimes it's not just your discovery. It may be discovery of other people. If you have a good business architect in your team that you work in as a business analyst, it may be a very good resource, because business architect would look at the context in the whole enterprise. For example, you're working on this particular problem that this particular department is facing, but how does it fit within the enterprise? And as we talked about the context, the exploratory questions, this is, Rosie, where you would ask these exploratory questions and try to understand what goes on around this, maybe draw some context level diagrams, and that may help your stakeholders who don't know the answers at least have the right questions to ask, and then go and discover and ask more questions and find out more. Okay, so let me just move on. So I have another question. If a project is started and BA joins during execution, project team may not see value in answering discovery questions. So if you mean that the discovery questions were already answered, then perhaps. So in my book, I also included a section on due diligence, so we'll touch a little bit on it. But if you join as a business analyst in the middle of the project and someone has already perhaps done the discovery, you need to do due diligence. You need to research and read and investigate everything that was captured already and make sure you're as prepared as possible. And then you may ask questions as clarifying questions just to make sure that you caught up to all the knowledge that project team already has, right? Okay, let me move on to the next topic, asking one question at a time. So a lot of business analysts are guilty of this. We can speak in very complicated sentences, right? We are analysts, our language abilities are sophisticated. If we want, we can write a whole paragraph, it will be just one sentence. So there is a danger in that, especially when you're asking a question. If your question is so complex that it has 2 or 3 questions hidden inside it, you're not going to get a good answer. Here is my example. So, do you allow to cancel the order after the payment has been received and the food preparation started, and apply the payment to a different order instead of sending customer a refund? Well, imagine I ask this question and my stakeholder says, yeah, that's right. Did you get an answer to your question? What do you think? Will you be able to proceed with this answer? Well, probably not, because your question had at least 2 components, and each of those 2 components had 2 components inside it. So really, you are setting yourself up for failure by asking this type of question. You should break it down into 2 or 3. And sometimes with the complex questions, we even need to draw a little scenario for our customer. Because if they misunderstand our question, which we think is very clear to us, but is not clear to them, they'll tell you, yes, of course. And then you will not realize that you guys misunderstood each other until much later. Yes, so we should decompose our questions. We should make our questions as atomic as possible. Just like we say about requirements. One requirement should be just about one idea. Same with the questions. Don't ask multiple questions at a time. So before I move on to immersion, I see another couple of questions. What if my title is business analyst, but end user give me all the requirements? Very good question. And it comes back to what's your role as a business analyst. We talked about it a little more in a different webinar, but really, when your end user cannot give you all the requirements, they only give them their own requirements. But you as a business analyst, you are defining the target state. And the target state means what is the process? What are the roles of the people? What are the outcomes? as one complex system. So each individual end user is only interested in their own use cases, in their own specific scenarios. But as an analyst, and again, if you have help from business architect, that's great. You look at the solution as a whole, where you have different users with different needs, and the final solution needs to somehow satisfy all of those needs. So it's a little bit of a risky situation where you are told that one user will give you all the requirements. And in fact, one of my tips on asking questions was ask questions from more than one person, because if you only ask one person, you only get one perspective, and chances are that this is not sufficient. So this is where you start to use your business analyst mindset to perhaps teach others about analysis, or show them in an example that you need to understand perspectives of other users, or whoever will be looking at the data, or the manager that will be looking at the reports, or the perspective of the customer that will be receiving the results of whatever that step is. So always think about all different personas that participate in this process. It's usually more than one end user, unless it's like a tiny little change. So let's talk about immersion a little bit. So what is immersion? And again, if anyone has experienced or has done a business process immersion, please type it in the chat. What it is really is, especially if you are new to an organization, or if you are new to that particular process, how do you do your discovery and your due diligence? You may just do a full business process immersion. So you'll work with a business expert, and you will just sit with them, and you will watch what they do, and you will ask them, why do they do it? So you're basically trying to do that. Thank you. Shadowing. You are shadowing business people as they're doing their daily job to understand what they do. And I want to really make this point here is, you will see what people really do, not what they say they do, or not what their managers think they do. Because again, whatever standard operating procedure says, or whatever the process flow diagram says, if you have a problem, chances are that the actual activities of the people are not always what they should be according to papers. And usually there is a reason for it. So that's one of the very important reasons to go into the shadowing or immersion, is to see how the actual business process differs from what's on paper. Yes, and it's a great way to engage. Absolutely. Great way to make those connections and become a trusted person. So I wanted to give you a few tips on immersion best practices, because it's not always easy, right? And some people are not actually very warm and fuzzy to have someone shadow them. First of all, you always have to start with support from the person's manager. You have to ask permission, or maybe have your project manager ask for permission, because when you shadow someone, usually you will slow them down, because you will ask questions, you will need to gather some evidence. So you need to have that permission and support, and you start with respect. So you have to be respectful of their time and what they need to do, and never judge them. They may be doing something strange, you think, or it looks like they're making a mistake. So don't judge them. Your job here during this time is to gather information. Ask why. Ask open-ended question. Say, I noticed you're doing this. Can you explain why are you doing this? Because what you will find, and usually when you do shadowing, you are set up with senior people who have a lot of experience. So what you will find is that those senior people actually found better ways to do things than the SOP says, the standard operating procedure, or the job description, because those job descriptions are sometimes written by people who are not doing this day to day, and they make a mistake. They can not realize that something is not really connecting. So the people who are doing the job will gradually find a way to do it that's easier, or makes more sense, or more convenient. Sometimes, of course, it would not be correct, but often it's their own way of optimizing the process. So don't judge. Don't come in as an expert that will tell everyone how to do everything best. Your job is to learn. So think of yourself as an apprentice, or as a student who is trying to learn the job. One important point is, ask the person that you're shadowing not to showcase. You're not asking them to do something especially wonderful today, or pretend that they always do things by the book. Ask them to do whatever they do normally. Don't change it for me. Don't change things on my behalf. Whatever you do every day, please keep doing it, okay? So they don't need to showcase to you or pretend to you that they're doing something different, because that defeats the whole point of immersion. And from that, the next point is, don't go behind their back. If they are honest with you, if they show you what you are actually doing in your job, don't go back to their manager with complaints and criticism. Again, that's not why you are there. There may be reasons why they are doing what they're doing. So really be there as an observer. And if the manager is asking you, please report back what you observed, you have to be very diplomatic. You can report back in general, but without any criticism or any personal observations that may be harmful to the person that you're observing. It's not your job to be their manager and to judge the efficiency of their work, because next time you're just are not gonna be invited, or people will clam up and they'll never explain things to you. If you're a business analyst, you really have to focus on efficiency. So try to be helpful. Maybe you can help with little things, and always prepare a plan B. Plan B is if the person you're shadowing is really not sure what to do with you and how to deal with you. They may not know where to start. So prepare some questions. For example, you can tell them, well, show me what you usually do when you first come to work. How do you know what to work on? Where do your assignments come from? How do you know which assignment is more important? What do you do with it? Where do you go? What if you don't have enough information? Ask all of those exploratory questions specific to their process, just to help them understand what is it that you want from them. Okay. So let's talk about artifact analysis next, or due diligence. So as you're starting to learn new business process or new business problem, chances are business already has a lot of artifacts applicable to this process. And for you don't always have to just ask people and interview them and tell me about it. There is a lot of information that you can yourself absorb from artifacts, and that will give you more background. And then with interviewing or immersion, you can focus on more critical or less clear points. So when you do artifact analysis, you're basically doing research. You're assessing what evidence exists today. What are the facts? What is the terminology? What are the examples of current state? Like, for example, the outputs that the process produces, some reports, or what do customers receive today? And you may be discovering some key information that people may not share with you, because if it's their day-to-day job, it seems very obvious to them. They know where to find it. So may not even think of telling you about it unless you ask them specifically. So when you collect these artifacts, it helps you first to have a reference point to what's done today, and secondly, it helps your further discussions, because you may be in a situation, in a meeting, where someone says, well, we don't do it this way, we do it this way. But you may have some artifacts that you've collected that clarify how things are done today sometimes, and you can use it to help your discussions along. So don't miss out on artifact analysis, especially as someone was asking, where you start as a business analyst on the project that it's already in motion. Go back and learn and research so that you know as much as you can possibly learn. Some examples of artifacts: glossaries, process flows, the outputs of the projects, perhaps correspondence with your customers, requirements, etc., etc. You probably can come up with many more examples. Sumit is asking a question: can we question the artifacts? Yes, of course. If these are the artifacts of the current process that needs to change, absolutely. First, you question them to understand better. Perhaps there are some business rules behind it that you don't know about. And secondly, you may question them if you see that something needs to change, or if it looks like something needs to change, or if someone tells you, well, this is a report we produced today, but it's actually no good because of X, Y, and Z. So absolutely, you don't take them for granted necessarily. It's a source of information about current state, but from there you will be determining requirements for future state, right? So let me see what were your questions in the chat. Let me just scroll a little bit to the top. I think, yeah, those are mostly your questions about immersion, and I appreciate you sharing with each other. So let's talk about the next topic, root cause analysis. Yes, and you can ask about these artifacts from your PM or your business sponsor, or like whoever on your project is there to help you and to facilitate you finding the information. So root cause analysis. Has anyone had to do root cause analysis for a business problem? And did you what did you find about it? What was your experience? If you want to put a little bit in the chat again, that would be great. So yeah, so a few people. So sometimes as business analysts, unfortunately, we are just told, okay, here's what I want to change. I want to take this button and move it over here and use this report and move the columns around, or I'm missing this and I'm missing that. And often your requests from users are very specific and they're really complaints about deficiencies. But sometimes you have to deal with a business problem and you're not sure why is this happening. For example, a certain segment of customers are leaving, or a certain business process always slows down in this point, or you are not really sure why the customers don't receive their packages on time, for example. And before you can define requirements, you really need to understand, well, what's the problem? Your requirement may be, well, I want my customers to get packages on time, but it's no good. It's just a goal. First, you need to understand why is this happening. So I can see some of you are already mentioning, yes, 5 whys, absolutely. Finding deviations of the process, absolutely. Fishbone framework, yeah. So you guys are already well on the way, for sure. So remember always, if you're given a business problem, start researching for the root cause of the problem. You're not just fixing the symptoms. For example, if this error message pops up, I want to be able to see the error message right away. But why is the error message happening? What's wrong? Is something wrong with the data? Is someone making mistakes on input? So asking what to do. And some of you are mentioning that you worked with analytics team to do some research and so on. So yes, there are several methods, and we'll talk a little bit about Fishbone today. One thing I wanted you to take from this workshop today is there is a difference between cause and effect, and between pain points and root cause of the problem. So when your users come to you with their requirements, sometimes they come to you with their pain points. They say, I really don't like this, or this really annoys me, or this takes up too much time. These are often just the pain points. They are the effects of the problem. They are visible to the users and they're painful. But you can't fix the symptom. You have to fix the root cause. Why is this happening? And that root cause sometimes is hidden. You need to find it and you need to solve it before you can reduce the pain points for your customers. So especially if you're given requirements, you always have to be wary whether it's actually the true root cause of the problem or whether it's just the symptom. The 5 whys matter that some of you mentioned before, very simple. As soon as you start to analyze the question, you ask why. Why is this happening? And when you get an answer, you ask again, why is that happening? And you keep asking why until you get to the root cause of the problem. Maybe 5 times, maybe more, maybe less. But if you ask why enough times, you hopefully will be able to get to the real problem behind it. You can use the 5 whys and capture the results in a fishbone diagram or Ishikawa diagram. So here is an example. We won't spend too much time on it because we want to make sure we get to the end. But this is just one of many examples how to use it, where you look at your problem. In my case, it's inaccurate customer biases. And you try to discover what are different reasons. And usually it's not just one reason. If it's a complex business problem, likely you will find multiple reasons. And the reasons might be with people or process or equipment or materials and so on. So these 6 categories here that I've used are popular, but this is not the only way to break up the root causes. But as you go, for example, I said, well, one of the reasons is that people have insufficient training. They don't know how to validate and address as they type it. and I highlighted it as one of the important problems that I want to fix. So this is one of the ways how you can capture your root cause analysis with your stakeholders, and most likely you will need different experts for each of these branches. And then as you do this analysis, you will highlight perhaps the most important causes that you would like to address first, because you may not be able to address all of them, but you will pick and choose addressing which problems will give you the most benefit in fixing your actual business problem. All right, so we'll move on to the next topic, which is process analysis. So probably if you are a business analyst, you have done process analysis. This is what we do a lot. So we just recap quickly. We're not just capturing the steps in the diagram, right? That's just documenting the current state. When we do process analysis for a new problem or for a new project, first we identify what are all the processes that happen. It may be more than one. We try to understand how they work and we model them, but we don't stop there. We need to analyze for efficiencies, and we need to identify the areas for improvement. And then your requirements are specifically those required process improvement changes. Why am I talking about this? Well, it's because the processes deteriorate over time. Again, you may have in theory this beautiful process flow or a job description or a standard operating procedure that tells you in this process we do 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then this is what we get at the end. And it looks very straightforward on paper. In practice, the processes grow with fluff, some additional steps are added, or some items that were not considered here are included, or sometimes the design of this process didn't take into account future growth or different types of customers, or maybe the data that is not available. So in reality, your process may look like a very convoluted web of different steps, some of them manual, some of them not always done, and so on. So as you are going about your everyday business, you need to be ready for a process that looks like this. And then we need to analyze it. We need to look at all these deficiencies and deviations and understand why they are happening, and then how we need to fix them to make this process more streamlined and to optimize it. So Bill Gates said once, automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify the efficiency, and automation applied to inefficient operation will magnify the inefficiency. So that sounds like common sense, right? It doesn't always happen that way in real life. How many of you have ever had your business stakeholder say, hey, this is a process we want to automate. Just capture it and automate it? Anyone ever was asked to do that? Me, yeah. Yes. It happened to me many times. Someone will just tell me, hey, this is a spreadsheet. This is what we usually do. Just, do something automated. We are tired of the spreadsheet. But what it turns out is you can't just automate what they do today, because what they do today is this. Imagine taking this nightmare of a process with all its exceptions and just capturing it and documenting it. What would be the point? The point is that before you automate something, you have to improve and optimize it first. Don't automate the suboptimal process, because you're just wasting time and money. While it's manual, okay, maybe fine. But once you automate it, then it becomes cemented in that software, this inefficient and process that has the necessary steps now becomes automated. Now go and try to change it. So as a business analyst, you have to stand up for it. Again, this is where your mindset needs to help you and needs to remind you. If your process is complicated, try to simplify it first. And complicated as a word means it's not the same as complex. Complex is something that is complex by its nature. Complicated is something that is made complicated by people, by adding things, or by, creating all different variations of it. And we know that sometimes it's just individual people. Someone had a power play. Someone had a little bit of politics involved. And suddenly it becomes a new process. So yes, thank you for everyone who's commenting. We need to simplify the process as much as we can, and then we automate a more optimal process. Otherwise, we are not really helping our business to use their money efficiently. So it's a really key point, and this is where business analysts really need to stand their ground. And you don't just follow what someone else says. You have to speak up and you have to say, I recommend we optimize this part of the process, or let's discuss whether we can optimize the steps and reduce the handoffs and so on. So here are just a few examples for you. Of course, it's not all. And if anyone is very interested, there are so many disciplines, starting with Six Sigma, business process improvement, business process reengineering, where there's a lot of theory and practice already in place. But even just at a high level, think about bottlenecks. If you have a process which always stops in the same point or slows down, look at that. Why does it happen? Do you have too many times where people need to hand off things to each other? Why? Is it a power play? Is it really necessary? Maybe if I give something to another person for just 5 minutes and then they give it back to me, can I do it all? Do I actually need to involve another person and lose the time? Are you sequencing activities that can be done in parallel and maybe done faster? Do you have too many loops and branches that maybe can be optimized through a different decision flow? Do you have the subflows and the same steps repeated in many places by different people where one person could do it? There's many ways to do it. I'm not going to cover it all. I just want to point out that it's an important part of business analysis. Yes, and stakeholders sometimes do not agree with suggested improvements. What do you do then? You analyze the data, you analyze the facts, you present them with the facts. So this is a good example where you can use analytics to help you. For example, if you have good data collected on your process, can your business intelligence team give you some statistics, for example, on the duration of a certain task or on the number of cases, for example, that are overdue that had this particular task as a bottleneck? If your stakeholders don't agree, sometimes it's because they don't have enough information. Their gut feel tells them you're wrong, but if you have the facts, it may help you actually to prove your point objectively, not subjectively, right? Because you're not trying to make it personal, you're trying to use the facts. So as much as possible, use the data. And if you've heard, I'll read up on process mining. It's a very interesting discipline where there are special tools now that will take the data about how your process is executed, and they will mine this data and they will highlight the different parts of the process where there is a slowdown or bottleneck, and it helps to prove your point where you recommend process improvements. Okay, so let me move on and I'll come back to more questions later. So modeling is one of my favorite subjects. I just put out an article on LinkedIn recently about modeling. I cannot say enough about the value of the pictures and models. Every time we write something in text, remember that according to research, not my research, about 65% of all people are visual learners. What does it mean? It means that they understand more information that presented to them visually, not as text, not through listening, but visually through pictures, diagrams, or information that is visually attractively arranged. So as business analysts, this is one of your most powerful techniques: modeling the process, modeling the business problem, modeling current state, using pictures to explain, to capture requirements. I'll be honest here, if I'm reviewing someone else's business requirements document, I'll open the document or I'll open it on my screen and I'll minimize it and I'll go through and I'll look for pictures. And if I have a 100-page document and it doesn't have a single model, I'm already very prejudiced, because how do I know? How do I know that you've done your job? How can you do it without models? Perhaps you can, and some people are really very strong in language, but you always need to think about audience as well. And again, more than half of your audience will understand requirements better if you have models and pictures. So without spending too much time, just a couple of reminders. We model behavior, and the model structure. Most business analysts know much more about model and behavior and process flows specifically, a sequence of activities, but that's not all. We also model structures. We will do context flow diagram. We can do conceptual data models. For behavior, we will do use case diagrams or state machines. There are so many different types of models that are suitable for different situations. As much as possible, try to expand your knowledge of different tools, and you will see that your stakeholders, both business and IT, will respond to models really well. So don't ever underestimate the power of models. If you'd like to learn more about modeling, I recently wrote a series of articles on 3 C's of modeling: clarity, consistency, and conciseness. I also published them on LinkedIn. We had a nice debate. So once you get my slides later today, you can just click on these links and you can go to the articles, and you'll see a lot of tips and tricks on making clear and concise models, and hopefully that will help you and give you more confidence to use models. Okay, so my last subject of today is about structuring requirements. So when we collect requirements and when we write and capture requirements, don't make your requirements look like a pile of bricks. Don't just throw them in the backlog or in the document in no particular order, because soon enough you will lose track of where you are and you will never know when you're done. So think of requirements needing structure. So instead of the pile of bricks, your requirements need to be structured in such a way that you are visualizing that future state that you're going to. You're visualizing your solution. So if I'm really building, say, a tower like this, it's much easier for me if I can see it. Even if it's a model, even if it's a picture, or it's a hierarchy of stories, I need to see something that helps me to see the structure in the requirements. So how do we do that? Again, lots and lots of tools at your disposal. Requirements management tools give you ability to create hierarchies, epics, themes, user stories, and then tasks. Or you can do sections like, for example, user interface requirements, reporting requirements, processing requirements, customer requirements. There's many ways to group it. And as you group it and as you nest groups of requirements under it, it's so much easier to understand. Sometimes you need to use spreadsheets, for example, to capture scenario matrices or your data dictionary, or perhaps a business rule set. Use those diagramming and modeling tools to create diagrams. You can use wireframe tools to create mock-ups of the future screens. Data analysis tools if you need to analyze your business scenarios. You may be using presentation software, collaboration for sharing, mind mapping, and you'll probably use a lot of low-tech tools as well. So again, think about that you're not limited to just Word documents, or you're not limited to Jira only. Even if I have my user stories in Jira, I would still appreciate a nice diagram that helps me find my way around a backlog that has 300 user stories. So there are really a lot of tools, and the more you use a variety of tools, the more chances you are that you will actually create the structure that other people can understand, both on business side when they're reviewing and approving it, and on technology side, whoever will be designing solution, and also the QA side, the people who will be testing it. You want all of them to have this shared understanding of requirements. So we are getting closer to the end of our webinar. Just one more minute and we'll do more questions. So just wanted to mention to you, if you are interested in more of a material like this, please follow me on LinkedIn, or you can sign up for my newsletter on my website, Why Change. I now have my YouTube channel, so my plan is to take some of the materials from these webinars and create YouTube videos as well. I also do individual one-on-one coaching for business analysts who either prepare for an interview or need to prepare their portfolio, or just want to develop certain skills, for example, for a more senior position. So if you're interested in that, you can always send me a message. Here is my email. Also, I'm providing this slide after each webinar to remind you that there are many resources for you out there. There are many books and good websites and blogs. And there's Babok, and then there's professional organizations. So you have so many materials now online that you can find everywhere. Don't be shy. These are all the links, by the way, so you can click on them. But go and research and Google and read books and read articles, and you will find much more. So I'm ready to answer a few questions if you would like. I really appreciate that you joined me today. Someone had to get up early, or someone will go to bed late, or needed to take out their lunch hour. I appreciate it. I hope that you found it useful. And please keep track of what I'm doing. If you like my videos, for example, sign up for my YouTube channel, and hopefully we will meet again. So let me see the questions that I haven't answered yet. Let's see. Was there any question that I haven't answered? Okay. The UX team seems to be a bottleneck for requirements. So, Rosie, I'm not sure whether you meant that UX team is a bottleneck in terms of providing requirements. What happens when I write acceptance criteria and it's their turn to create prototypes and it takes so long for them to do it? Yeah, so that's more of a probably a Scrum Master project management question where you need others to actually help you. So I think one of the points here is that as a business analyst, you're not alone, and you should not be alone. Sometimes there are situations where others are not delivering, or they have a different schedule. Make sure you're involving your project manager or Scrum Master and getting them to support you and to help you do your job. Systems versus business requirements, joined together in one doc or separated? So Jatin is asking this question. So oftentimes it's separated, either like different sections on the document or two completely different documents because they have different audience. In user stories or in Jira world, sometimes you'll have a user story would be a business requirement, but then individual tasks, development tasks inside it will really become your system specs. So also they'll have different audiences based on the type of the Jira object you're looking at. I would say that most business stakeholders would not be interested in reading your system spec. And if you have a developer that has a system spec, it's unlikely that they'll go back to business requirements. But your QA team, your testers, probably will be the people who will want to see both. So based on how big your requirement set is, you may as well separate it. Some companies have their own standards, but if you don't have a standard, try separating it. What technical skills do BAs require in today's job market? So this is another question. So there are some, I guess, some technical skills if you mean knowledge of technology. Because if I would start with technical skills, you really need to know modeling tools very well, for example. But if you mean more technical, think about data analysis. Many business analysts today also do data analysis. So if you can run your own SQL query, for example, that comes in helpful. You don't necessarily have to do it, but sometimes you do. It really depends on how big your organization is and how specialized you are. Some business analysts today specialize in analytics. So for example, they focus on business intelligence requirements, and then they need to know more about data science and different business intelligence tools. I would say that if you are tied to a company that is tied to a particular technology platform, for example, Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics, then you may just need more technical knowledge on that particular platform. So let me see if there are any more questions. So I see some people. Thank you. What a hard skills BA require? Yeah, so hard skills, Daryl, think about again. Analytical skills, root cause analysis, data analysis. It's again, there is a combination of hard and soft in there, but I would say that those are the hardest skills. Yes, no, guys, thank you very much. I see some of you dropping off. Really great to see you all. Wonderful. So here's one more question I see. What should we do when the requirements for the entire developed feature changes later completely? So that probably needs a separate conversation. But if you mean that the original requirements were not effective, for example, then it becomes a question: are you redoing it? If you mean that there is a new business use case that didn't exist before, then it's a different story. So I think it's a little hard to answer this question without the context. Let me see. Yeah, SQL skills are good. Yeah, I agree. Data analysis. So is SQL still needed for your BA? So I would say, Nikita, yes. And I know that now Python and Julia and R and all of these languages are very popular. However, what I also hear and see that many companies that now have data lakes, they still copy the data from the data lake into regular SQL databases for analysis because it's just much easier. And a lot of the Python developers still need to use SQL. Plus, as a business analyst, chances are if you get access to data, most likely it will be an SQL sandbox. So if you are interested in data analysis, I think the core principles of structured query language are very useful. I don't think they will ever go away because SQL-based database is still best for structured data. Data lake maybe for unstructured, but most of the data that we analyze daily is still structured. So it really depends on how deeply you want to go, but don't think that it's out of date. Think of all the COBOL developers that 40 years ago thought they will never have a job again because COBOL was the language of mainframe. And guess what? Those people are paid through the nose now because we still use mainframes everywhere, right? Nobody replaced mainframes yet, or very few companies. Pure business analysis skill. Is it enough in today's market? So pure business analysis skill is actually not that easy to come by. Like a lot of people who start their job as business analysts, they still need to develop those skills. So I would say it's a very, very good start. Once you start in a particular organization, you will discover what else you need to learn to succeed in that particular organization. Okay, I think I caught up with everyone's questions. What time is it? We still have a few minutes if anyone has any more questions. So if you want to come off mute and perhaps let me know if you have a particular question. I'm going to stop sharing now. So I still see a few people here. So I will share the slides. I will share the the recording as well for sure. So let me just get organized and I'll send it to all of you. And let me see if I need to answer any more questions. Is BA and product owner the same, Nikita? Not necessarily. Usually in Agile team, product owner is a representative from the business. So either a product manager or operations manager, someone who is in charge of that process or product. And business analyst ideally works with product owner. However, some companies merge those responsibilities. But think about it this way. As business analyst, you will move from project to project or from initiative to initiative. And product owner ideally is the person that owns that business process all the time and stays with it even after the project and all the changes are done. So sometimes you have to do a lot of responsibilities of product owner, but by default, in theory, it is not the same position. Is CBAP worth it for renewing every year? Yeah, Jutin. So this is a tricky question. Certification skills will never replace your real practical experience. I would say that you have to judge it based on the employer you're with. How much do they want their analysts to have CBAP certification? Or if you want to apply for a different job and the employer you're aiming for is really, really particular about you having CBAP, then you play by the rules, right? So it's really about getting the job or keeping the job versus being successful in your job. Any thoughts on AI and IoT and how much BAs should have knowledge about it? So Pooja, I don't know if I got your name right. I think that it's a very large area, and if you, as a business analyst, are interested, you should learn as much as possible about it, because more and more companies want to employ, at least machine learning in their algorithms, and they would love to use more predictive analytics. Many business processes now incorporate some element of predictive analytics, where the old process flow really isn't useful anymore. It becomes more obsolete, because as your process goes through the steps, in this certain step, you can't even describe it as a process, as a streamline diagram anymore, because your predictive analytics will take all the information at that step and then tell you where should you go next in your process, what should be the next activity. So I think that's a very, very promising area. If you are thinking of what to learn next, by all means go and learn it, because predictive analytics will change the processes as we know them significantly in the near future, for sure. How often is BA the Scrum Master? So Stacy, really, again, BA shouldn't be Scrum Master, because Scrum Master's job is to remove obstacles from all the team and help them function and maintain their velocity. If BA is doing Scrum Master's job, it will be very hard for them to do their own job. I know that it happens. BAs end up being PMs as well and Scrum Masters. I was fortunate. The projects I worked with usually had a separate person doing the Scrum Master / PM. So I would always try to have a separate person doing that, right? They have special training, but also their job as a Scrum Master is to remove obstacles that you as a business analyst face in doing your job, so that you can do your job. All right, so I don't see any more questions. It's 1:06. I'm gonna be slowly wrapping up. I'll stay on for a couple of more minutes, but again, thank you very much for joining, for all of your questions. I think we had an excellent group today. Look at all these comments you guys exchanged with each other. That was fantastic. So great pleasure as always having these webinars. Thank you. Enjoy the day or enjoy the night or go back to bed. And until next time, thanks everybody.